Welcome to a Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NBA podcast. Nick Whalen here with James Anderson. James, I wouldn't call this an emergency edition of the podcast, although a small part of me felt inclined to see if you were up at around 12:15 a.m. Central Time on Tuesday when news of the Bucks series of transactions broke. It was initially going to be an NBA draft preview podcast. That, of course, comes to us on Wednesday night, the 2020 NBA draft, but I feel like it's been superseded by a few of the trades that we've already seen since the NBA's transaction window opened up at the start of the week. So I want to dive into a few of those trades, get your take on them. How those trades change some of these teams, what it means for some of these players' fantasy values, and then we'll finish up with some draft talk at the end, previewing Wednesday night. But let's go in semi-chronological order and start with Chris Paul to the Phoenix Suns. This was the first big one. I mean, we had Dennis Schroeder going to the Lakers. That was reported Sunday, finalized Monday. But Chris Paul going to the Phoenix Suns from the Oklahoma City Thunder. This was the one that had Twitter buzzing most of the day on Monday. I like this trade for both teams overall. I think Phoenix doing this deal without having to give up the number 10 pick in this draft, without having to give up Cam Johnson, without having to give up McCall Bridges, I think that's a pretty big win. But on the other side, it's hard to look at this deal and look at some of the risk and some of the money involved with Chris Paul and say that it's not a good deal for OKC as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think OKC did really well to make this trade when they did. I mean, they kind of had to trade. I think they had to trade Chris Paul this offseason because you can't risk going into the season and then having his quad or his hamstring just be an issue all year. And then like as soon as he's hurt again, then it starts looking like a terrible contract again. So I think trading him now, like it's hard to imagine this not being the high point of his value on that contract. So I think they were wise to do that, wise to get positive value back. I mean, I'm sure they're going to get other stuff for the players they got back from Phoenix at some point. So I think it was a big win for them. I mean, it's a win for the Suns because they're the Suns and they've been kind of pathetic for the past decade, and this puts them into the playoff mix. I mean, I don't think that they're going to go to a conference finals or anything with this Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton trio, but I think not making a move like this probably eventually leads to Devin Booker requesting a trade down the road. I mean, that still could happen. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's someone that tries to get himself shipped out of there before the end of his contract. But you at least keep Devin Booker happy for the short term, which I think is a pretty good accomplishment. And you're probably in line to make the playoffs if Chris Paul can stay healthy this upcoming season, which is a big if, like I said, but at least on paper, they look like a playoff team now.
Hi, fans. Please like our video and subscribe to the RotoWire channel. Then please go to rotowire.com/pod for a free 10-day trial.
They certainly look like a playoff team. I don't know that this necessarily puts them, quote unquote, over the top. I mean, they're not going to contend for a finals berth. I don't think they're even in contention as of right now for a Western Conference finals berth. No. I mean, I think the Lakers, the Clippers, the Warriors, Denver for sure are ahead of them. I think Dallas as well. We'll see how long Porzingis is out to begin the year. But I mean, their upside is significantly higher. I'm just with you when it comes to Chris Paul and the injury history. I think it's a pretty big risk. And that's why I'm glad that they didn't have to give up Bridges, for example, because there's a scenario in which Chris Paul misses like 25 games this year. I mean, especially when you consider the condensed schedule, the amount of back-to-backs, it's going to be an accelerated playoff schedule. Like he's kind of the number one guy outside of maybe Blake Griffin, who you would worry about in a scenario like this. I mean, last year was such an anomaly for him. Like if you look at games missed from his final year with the Clippers and 2 years with the Rockets, I mean, he missed 21 games, he missed 24 games, he missed 24 games, and then last year he misses 2 games, and both of those were rest related. So, hopefully, as an NBA fan, it keeps up. I think it'd be a lot of fun if he has another great season for the Suns, but it's a lot of risk for a guy who's going to be 36, by the time the playoffs roll around.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was more pressure on the Thunder to move him than there was pressure on the Suns to trade for him. And I think that the market was so dry on other destinations for him because of that contract that's why there weren't more significant assets that headed back to Oklahoma City, because the Suns could kind of just say, well, Chris Paul wants to come here. Like, no other team is really willing to take on that salary. So you kind of have to trade him to us and kind of take what we give you. So I think that the Thunder were lucky to even get a first out of it. But yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be huge. I mean, I hope Chris Paul stays healthy, but I think it's going to be huge for DeAndre Ayton specifically. I think just having a point guard like that is really going to set him up and put him in a position to have a lot of success and maybe even help with his sort of development. I mean, Chris Paul is kind of a prickly character at times, but I think he is definitely a brilliant basketball mind and someone that could help those guys develop a little bit. And we'll see how. I mean, Devin Booker wanted to play with Chris Paul. I think they have the same agent. We'll see how long they like playing with each other. I mean, Chris Paul can often wear on guys, and I think Chris Paul and Devin Booker seem like pretty different personalities to me. But at least for now, I would project them as maybe like the 7 seed or something like that. Maybe you can, depending on the matchup, maybe you can have a entertaining first round series. But I think just getting to the playoffs, I think, is kind of the end goal here for this Suns team.
I know there are family reasons and proximity to LA reasons that Chris Paul reportedly wanted to land in Phoenix, but it's a little bit interesting to me that he wouldn't have pushed harder for a destination like a Milwaukee, like a Philly, teams who are maybe on the periphery when it came to him, because like we're saying now, like the Suns, even after this trade, are still 40-1 to win the title. Like they're not winning the title next year. They're probably not going to win it in 2022 either. And, at that point, Chris Paul is going to be, firmly in the twilight of his career. So, I think he's not quite to the point where he's solely focused on chasing a ring, because I don't think the Suns are the number one spot to do that. But for a guy who's never been past the conference finals, I thought it was a little bit interesting that he was willing to, I guess, quote unquote, settle for the Suns.
I don't think he had a choice. Like I think he would have definitely preferred to go to those other teams, but they weren't interested. Like if you're the Bucks,
Milwaukee wasn't interested.
Right. I mean, the Sixers, I'm sure there are packages they would have happily done that the Thunder would not have done. Like the Thunder didn't want to take back their terrible salary when they could take back Rubio and stuff. And I mean, I think the writing was kind of on the wall to CP3. Like, obviously, he would have loved to have played for the Lakers if that was even remotely possible. I don't think he settles for the Suns. So, I mean, I think he just kind of saw his options and decided that the Suns were the most palatable of those remaining options.
So, like I said, it was reported and reiterated on Tuesday that the Bucks were never really in on Chris Paul, cursory phone calls at best. Based on the moves that Milwaukee ultimately made, which we'll get to in a second, in your mind, would it have made more sense to throw a similar package, to OKC or maybe even reduce it, based on Paul's age to obtain Chris Paul as rather than Bogdanovic or Jrue Holiday?
No, because you're already sort of seeing the Bucks. They're kind of limited now. I mean, it's going to be mostly minimum salary guys around this starting lineup. If you go with Chris Paul instead of Jrue and Bogdanovic, then you're just talking about Giannis, Middleton, Chris Paul, and you're probably going to have to start a veteran minimum salary guy in one of those spots. I mean, you're so handicapped contractually there. And I think Chris Paul would have been a better fit just from a basketball standpoint than Jrue Holiday. But you can't, I don't know if Giannis was going to be excited about playing with a guy that's as old as Chris Paul. Giannis wants to look 2, 3, 4 years down the road. You can't really do that with Chris Paul. Chris Paul is a win in 2021 and win in 2021 only type of
Right.
move there. So if you were Giannis, you might just say, all right, well, I'll play with him for 1 year and then I'll get out of here. So all of the Bucks moves have to be framed from how does this affect Giannis's desire to stay? And you can't just look at like, oh, like Jrue Holiday and Eric Bledsoe, like that's not much of an upgrade. Well, it's a huge upgrade if it gets Giannis to stay, right? And so I think that everything was kind of framed from that prism.
Yeah, I think there's a case to be made that just for next season, maybe Chris Paul gives you a slightly higher season or ceiling, assuming that he stays healthy. But the health is a huge risk, like we said. And then beyond that, you're setting yourself up to basically kick the can down the road and be in a similar roster construction kind of dilemma in 2022 or 2023. What is your initial reaction to the acquisition of Holiday and then the subsequent acquisition of Bogdanovic? I think if you were on Twitter last night, it was, all right, this is awesome. We got Jrue Holiday. 5 minutes later, oh my God, we gave up 3 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps. And then kind of back to optimism when it was revealed that, this was all kind of one big line of transactions that was going to lead to Bogdanovic as well. So in the end, it's 3 first-round picks, 2 pick swaps, Dante DiVincenzo, and a few role players. I mean, Eric Bledsoe and George Hill were productive guards for the Bucks, but I think both had kind of expired with this roster. And then DJ Wilson and Ersan are just salary throw-ins to Sacramento. So essentially, you're giving up Bledsoe, Hill, DiVincenzo, and then those 5 first-round picks for Bogdanovic, who you're going to sign to an extension, and then Jrue Holiday, who you would hope to, if things go well, sign to an extension after this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot to discuss. Again, like the number one thing is just, does Giannis now stay? And if Giannis stays because of these moves, then they were no-brainer. You do them all day, every day type of moves, right? Like that's the whole point. And the draft picks, that's a lot to pay. I mean, you're basically paying the Paul George price for a player who's not as good as Paul George. But the Pelicans kind of had the Bucks over a barrel because they could have gone into the season. They had the leverage to say, hey, like, yes, your offer is the best offer. Like, even if it was just 2 firsts and no swaps, that's probably the best offer that was out there. But the Pelicans could just threaten to say, hey, we're going to go into the season. We'll trade him at the trade deadline. And Giannis won't sign your Supermax because you aren't going to have Jrue Holiday on the roster. And the Bucks needed to make this happen before the start of the season in order to theoretically get Giannis to sign that max. And so the Pelicans could just keep holding out for as many draft picks as they wanted. And the Bucks really didn't have any leverage to negotiate down from that. Otherwise, they were going to risk going into the year with basically the same roster. So I think you have to just frame it from the Giannis standpoint. Yeah, Jrue Holiday doesn't solve all their issues. He's not going to be a guy that can create his own shot against a conference finals level defense, similarly to Eric Bledsoe, but he will hit open threes like Bledsoe was unable to. And he's just as good of a defender. I think he's a really good personality. Like, I think he meshes really well with Chris Middleton and Giannis from a personality standpoint. Bogdanovic, I've loved Bogdanovic for a long time. I think he's incredibly underrated as a pick and roll ball handler, a guy that can get his own shot and set his teammates up late in the clock. Like, I know he's a shooting guard, but he does have some, like we've seen it in international play, where he does sort of have some Luka Doncic, James Harden to his game, where he can be an on the ball guy. And I think that part of the equation is huge for them because it does give them another option late in games when the offense kind of bogs down in the playoffs. And the one thing I'm wondering is Coach Bud finally going to be willing to employ a switching defensive scheme in the regular season to prepare for the inevitability of having to go to that scheme in the postseason? Because the personnel is there now. Like, if you go Holiday, Bogdanovic, Middleton, Giannis, 1 through 4, and then Lopez, I mean, you should be able to switch most actions other than the ones involving Lopez, and they should practice that during the regular season and get ready for that for the postseason. But having like Middleton and Bogdanovic as over 40% guys from 3, Holiday as a guy that's 37, 38% from three. That just gives Giannis a ton of space. So I love it. I love the fit. I think they're going to have success in getting some ring chasing veterans to sign for the minimum or a little bit above that to kind of fill out the bench. It was a lot to pay, and there's a good chance that one or multiple of those picks end up being kind of regrettable picks to have traded away, especially since they're unprotected. But the risk was if you didn't do anything, Giannis probably leaves. So you had to do something. And, even if Giannis is only there for, another 3, 4, 5 years, I still think it's a win, because if Giannis leaves, you're going to be bad no matter what, no matter how many picks you have. The Bucks' history of drafting in the first round has been really miserable, other than Giannis and Dante DiVincenzo. So I think they kind of had to do it, and I think it was obviously a huge haul for the Pelicans. I wouldn't have wanted to sell low on DiVincenzo. I mean, he had an awful bubble, but I think he was awesome before the bubble, and I think the bubble just kind of affected guys differently. So I definitely understand it from the Kings' perspective to kind of buy low on him. I mean, he is kind of similar to Bogdanovic, so you get him on a cheaper deal. You get to maybe rehab Buddy Hield's value a little bit. I really think all these trades really made a lot of sense for all three teams.
Yeah, I thought so too. I was surprised, based on how DiVincenzo finished the year, that he was enough to be the swing piece for Bogdanovic. But you have to consider, I mean, Bogdanovic has only been in the league 3 years, but he is already, 28. He'll be 29, at the end of this season. So, you're not like trading a guy who, is 24 for a guy who's 22. He's an advanced player. And I think it was pretty clear that, he probably didn't want to be in Sacramento anyway. So there maybe wasn't a ton of leverage there. But, all these moves together, I think are, I wouldn't say a home run just because of the amount of draft capital given up to New Orleans, but you can't operate as if Giannis is going to leave, or as if Giannis is going to tear his ACL and miss a season. You kind of have to hope for the best with these scenarios. And I think one thing that they didn't do is mortgage the future outside of draft picks, because you acquired a guy in Jrue Holiday who you plan to be there not just for this year. It's 3, 4, 5 years. Same with Bogdanovic. You're signing him to what will presumably be a 3 or 4 year extension. So, you're not only saying like, hey, look, Giannis, we got these guys for this year. We're going to go all in and win it. And if we don't, we'll regroup next summer and figure it out. We got you like a brand new core, essentially, of guys that you can not only play with this year. And I think the pressure, assuming that Giannis does sign, whether it's the Supermax, whether it's a 1+1, it seems like it's trending in that direction. The biggest thing that this does to me is it takes the extreme pressure off of next season that we've seen with LeBron in Cleveland, that we saw with LeBron his last year in Miami, that we saw with Durant in OKC, where, it's enough pressure alone just to win the finals in a normal NBA season. And then to have your best player have this added stress that, every single loss, every single bad game, you're getting questions about it. I think they've put a nice core around him that is just going to diffuse a lot of that pressure. And I think there's no way you can look at the Bucks now, even with some of the asset depletion, and say that you're not more confident about the future today than you were 12 hours ago.
Right. I mean, they are a lot thinner than they were last year. So, if they deal with injuries, that could sink them. Right. But if they stay healthy, that starting five, there really aren't many weaknesses, right? Like, I mean, they can match up with pretty much anyone. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they fill out the bench. Because right now it's like Thanasis as the sixth man. I hope that they're able to. I hope that
they'll figure it out. Teams like this always figure it out. They'll get somebody. Yeah. Somebody will come back. I mean, it's not off the table that Wes Matthews could maybe be more interested in re-signing now as like a sixth man. The injury thing is interesting that you mentioned, but I think the counterpoint to that is the Bucks have already tried the depth approach the last 2 years, and it worked really well in the regular season. It enabled them to play their best players 30 minutes a game. But when push came to shove in the regular season and teams are able to clamp down on Giannis a little bit more, they're able to contain Chris Middleton, you're starting to rely on guys who just weren't good enough for that. And it's pretty hard to win a title when you have, one great player, one very good player, and then everybody else is just pretty good. In recent NBA history, you need more top end talent, and I think the Bucks recognize that. And even though it does put you at more risk, if Bogdanovic misses a month or if Holiday misses 2 months, they're going to be in trouble. I think it's a gamble that you just have to take at this point, because the other approach, it failed pretty miserably, especially this past year.
Right. They did not have the choice of just not doing anything was just not something they could really do unless they were just cool with Giannis leaving. Right. The only way, if they had done nothing, they basically would have had to win the title with that core from last year to convince Giannis to stay. We just saw the team that won the title this past year, like KCP was like their third best player. So clearly top end talent is what you need. And yeah, for all the reasons we laid out, I think the Bogdanovic piece makes it fit so well, right? If they had just done the Jrue Holiday trade, then I think the people that were saying, did they actually even get better, might have had a point. But now that you have that extra on-ball guy who can really stretch the floor, you can't do that pack the paint against Giannis thing against that starting lineup, because you can't leave those guys in the corner or out on the wing, from three. So I just think if I'm the rest of the league, I am kind of worried about this now, because now they look like a team that's built for the playoffs as well as the regular season. And also you have all these teams like the Raptors and the Heat and the Mavericks that were sort of circling that 2021 cap space, thinking that they could lure Giannis away. Now they have to quickly on the fly sort of change plans and start figuring out alternatives, because it does sort of seem like Giannis at the very least will be off the market for a couple more years.
Yeah, well said. Moving on for the Bucks, we won't spend much time on this one, but Robert Covington moving from Houston to Portland in exchange for 2 protected first-round picks. Actually, I think the first one wasn't protected. That's just the 16th pick in tomorrow's draft. And then Trevor Ariza goes back to Houston as well. Given everything else that's going on with the Rockets, this was just like a really weird wrench to throw in. And I think on the surface, it seems like a deconstruction type of trade. There's no world in which Trevor Ariza is a better player than Robert Covington. And I thought Covington actually fit in really well and was really productive with the Rockets based on that scheme last year. So I like the acquisition for Portland. But in terms of the Rockets, it's tough to read what this actually means, as far as how it relates to Harden.
I think they're tearing it all down. They you have him basically saying he wants out. Westbrook wants out. When's the last, I think Kobe Bryant's basically the last time a star player has won it out and not gotten out. And that was over a decade ago. I'll be very fascinated to see how the Harden, the Brooklyn talks go, but I think it seems pretty clear that you're going to trade PJ Tucker now. You're going to trade Harden. You might not trade Westbrook, because I think you have to attach draft picks to get off of him. So, you could just keep Westbrook, and he might be a malcontent, but you can just say, hey, nobody's willing to take you on without us trading assets to get off of your contract. So, well,
maybe that's where these 2 draft picks from Portland come into play. I don't think that's that insane.
If they're just saying if they're going to trade him no matter what, then those draft picks do help them get off of him. But that's not, to me, that's not how a trade demand works. Teams don't trade guys because they ask out when they have to attach picks to get off of them, right? When a guy asks out,
but in some ways they historically kind of have.
When's the last time a player asked to leave and the team facilitated that move by attaching a bunch of picks to get off of them? It just doesn't happen. Part of the reason it doesn't happen
takes a special personality.
Most players with bad contracts don't ask to leave because they know that that's a laughing hilarious request. But
Russell
yeah,
Westbrook.
I mean, back to the Portland side of this though, I'm excited because I think if they hadn't really done anything, then they're just kind of like maybe they get the 8 seed. But now, I mean, I think there's talk that maybe they'll go after Paul Millsap to play the 4. And if you go into the year with Nurkic, Millsap, Covington as your defensive oriented front court, that's pretty intriguing with that backcourt. I mean, just McCollum and Lillard just with 3 scrubs is a pretty good offense. So
right.
You just put those 2 guys and then have the defensive minded bigs. I mean, I think it's that they're all of a sudden a team that, you don't want to face them if you're in like the 4-5 matchup or even like the 6-3 matchup, because we've seen what Damian Lillard can do in the playoffs. So I think it's exciting. It's fun when this Blazers team is a little interesting rather than just like, oh yeah, like Dame Lillard's awesome, but they're going to get bounced in the first round.
Which team do you like more heading into next year between Phoenix and Portland? I like Lillard's better than Paul, Booker's better than McCollum, and the rest of the supporting cast. I mean, Phoenix is maybe a little bit deeper, but in terms of guys that you like, I think they're pretty comparable.
Well, kind of want to see what other moves they have in store, because I feel like they're both kind of 80% done with their offseason, but not all the way done.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm leaning towards the Blazers because they are battle tested. They have played in a ton of big games. I think their defensive identity is with Nurkic and kind of that pack line defense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they make more sense to me defensively. Terry Stotts is a proven good coach. So, I mean, who do you like more out of Booker and Lillard? I mean, obviously Lillard over CP and Booker over McCollum, but what about Lillard versus Booker?
I think it's still Lillard for me. I mean, we saw an advanced version of Booker at the end of the bubble that I would like to see for a full season. And I think adjusting to playing with Chris Paul maybe throws that off a little bit. But I don't know. To me, Lillard's just a little more proven. I mean, he's, for better or for worse, he has taken a team to the Western Conference Finals before. Maybe not your typical team that would find itself in that position. But Devin Booker is younger, but he hasn't even taken a team to the playoffs at this point. Right. So a lot of that's not necessarily a knock on him personally, but I think for me, it's pretty clearly Lillard. Although I would expect Booker to maybe eclipse him within the next 2 or 3 years. I want to talk about Dennis Schroeder real quickly before we get to James Harden. This seemed like a great move at the time for the Lakers. It still is, but in the shadow of some of these other bigger moves, it seems just like kind of blah. But at the same time, the Lakers are the defending champs. They're not under nearly as much pressure as some of these other teams are to improve rapidly and have the type of results next year. I think it's pretty clear that the Lakers are going to treat most of next season as glorified run up to the playoffs, and they feel pretty confident about where they are. I'm thrilled that Danny Green is no longer on this roster. I think getting rid of him is huge. They do give up the 28th pick, which for a team or a LeBron team that typically doesn't even care about draft picks, that's not a huge deal. Either way, I think it's hard not to see this as at least a minor upgrade for the Lakers, who, especially if they lose Rondo, are going to be pretty starved for guard depth.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're buying high on Schroeder and you're selling low on Danny Green. So from that aspect, I think again, Sam Presti just keeps kind of winning. I mean, I'm sure he's going to flip Danny Green for something as well. But I think the Schroeder fit with the Lakers just from that angle is excellent because, LeBron James is not going to want to carry the offensive load for this entire season. Like last year, basically it was, is LeBron James on the floor, then the offense is good. If LeBron James is off the floor, then the offense is terrible. And now, like, Schroeder's not amazing, but he at least can run a decent offense, especially if he's out there with AD. He's a really solid pick and roll player. He can hit threes. So I like the fit a lot. I don't think running it back with Rondo would have been the smart move. I think kind of you let like if the Clippers want to pay Rondo based on the playoffs last year, then I think you just let them.
Yeah.
So I think it definitely made sense from a personnel standpoint for the Lakers, and it made sense from an asset standpoint for the Thunder.
I would have liked to see the Lakers chase Covington. I mean, can you do that same deal for Covington? Maybe you have to throw in Kuzma or something along those lines. I mean, I think he would have been a great fit, although you could argue that point guard is a bigger need.
I think they probably would argue that. You need that second ball handler next to LeBron, and I don't think Caruso is quite up to that. And Covington, I don't know. He would have been a good fit, but I think they needed to kind of address that secondary ball handler spot, and then they'll get some veteran guys to play on the wing. Not as good as Covington, but Covington I think is sort of overrated and underrated at the same time. Like he's a good 3-point shooter for his position, and he's really long and stuff, but he's not this sort of like on-ball defensive stopper that I think people make him out to be. And in fact, at times you would see teams playing the Rockets would go at him one-on-one. Like he's a good help defender, but I mean, he's not some stopper out there on the wing. And so I think that makes him sort of more replaceable just from the Lakers standpoint.
All right, let's finish up with James Harden. I feel like people are already talking about this like it's a done deal with Harden to Brooklyn. I don't think it's that much of a lock. The Rockets are under no obligation to trade James Harden. I mean, everything that's come out publicly is that they're working to repair that relationship. They want to run it back. That's the term that's been used most with Harden, which is kind of why I thought the Covington thing is so strange. I mean, that completely goes against the notion that you're trying to put the best team around James Harden for next year. And it leads me to believe that, maybe they're resigned to the fact that that relationship could be irreparable. But I want to open with this. If you're the Brooklyn Nets and you have a real chance to acquire James Harden, let's say you put all the necessary chips on the table, Dinwiddie, LeVert, Allen, picks, whatever it might be, is it a no-brainer to you that if you can get James Harden and you don't have to give up Durant and Kyrie, you just do it because he's James Harden?
No, because you like the potential that the whole situation kind of just explodes from a personality standpoint is one reason. I don't think you want to be the team that gives James Harden his next like 4 or 5 year max contract. And I think if you trade for him, that probably ends up happening. And if things go well, then you end up paying him. If things go poorly, then things went poorly. So like either of those outcomes isn't ideal. You have the Bradley Beal thing sort of hanging there. And I fully believe the Wizards when they say they don't. Like, I don't think the Wizards want to ever trade Bradley Beal. So I think it's going to have to get to a point where Bradley Beal asks out, and I don't know if he's going to do that or when he's going to do that. You don't know if you're the Nets, if that's something that's going to happen. It's something that could happen, but it's not necessarily going to happen. And you're not necessarily going to have the best package, even if you hold on to LeVert and Dinwiddie. Right. Like some other team could come in with an even better young player, like a Michael Porter level player or something, for instance. So it's, first of all, I wouldn't have taken in Kyrie Irving just to get Kevin Durant in the first place if it had been me. So I think just the fact that they did that tells me that they will do this. Like if you're willing to kind of bring in Kyrie Irving, then you're willing to bring in James Harden.
Yeah. And you're willing to bring in DeAndre Jordan.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be fascinating to watch. I kind of think it's inevitable. And I kind of think the Nets are in the position of power here. And if I were them, I would just be like, here's the best offer we're willing to do. And if you don't want to do it, fine. But we can pretty much promise you James Harden's going to be a malcontent, and you're going to end up trading him to us anyways, and it's going to get ugly before you do that. So, if you don't want to do the deal now, fine, but here's the deal, and whenever you're ready to do it, you can have it.
Right. I think there's a scenario in which this goes down the Anthony Davis path. I don't know if Harden would go as far as to sit out games like Davis was, but I could certainly see it getting to that point at which, maybe, with the Pelicans, it was always, we're not trading him to the Lakers. We're not giving him what he wants. We're not giving him what he wants. Well, where did he end up with the Lakers? Like, eventually it wears on you, I think, as an organization, as an ownership. You have a new regime in there, both at head coach and GM. I don't think that's how they want to begin their tenure. So if Harden's willing to wait it out, I could see it going down that path. I mean, part of me wants to see the Nets play without Harden first. Like maybe they're just not that good. Maybe they feel like they need one more guy. LeVert, can't fit with Kyrie and Durant, whatever. And you make the trade at the deadline. Obviously, you risk another trade happening. Harden going somewhere else in the meantime. But I feel like they're in such a good position now with two great players at the top, and then a rarity where most of these teams that bring together two good players, you have to clear out your roster to make room. They have a productive center in Allen. You have a serviceable veteran, I guess, in DeAndre, who probably ends up starting. You have LeVert. You could bring back Joe Harris. Durant, Kyrie plus that roster is still top 2 or 3 in the East. So to me, you're risking a pretty good thing to become a slight step better. But like you said, there's already a chance that Kyrie and Durant alone is kind of a problematic pairing. And then you're bringing in, I think, probably the toughest superstar right now, other than Russell Westbrook, to fit around other superstars.
Yeah. It's like if you bring Harden in, he's your primary ball handler. And how long would it take for that to be the case before Kyrie is just really unhappy? Like if
Right.
Kyrie is basically just playing off the ball whenever their starting lineups out there, he's not going to like that at all. He'd be the third option, and he's not going to ever think of himself as a third option type of guy. Mm-hmm. I think KD would love it. KD would love playing with Harden, and I think even if there was a way of just having it be those two.
Well, that was going to be my next question. If you're the Nets, can you just say, like, look, this is a business, Kyrie. We're sending you and Karras to Houston, and we're bringing back James Harden. Like, that's the ideal scenario, right? But I don't think from like a personality / potential karma standpoint, they want to go down that path. But that's what they should do in a vacuum.
Right. Well, and let's say it's Kyrie, James Harden, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Jordan. Like that might be the worst defense in the league.
Yes.
So
exactly.
So it might be the best offense in the league, but it might be the worst defense in the league. So I think it'd just be really fun to see that team sink or swim, because they would definitely sink or swim. It wouldn't be a middle, like they wouldn't win like 58 games and like lose close in the Eastern Conference Finals or something. I think they would either be amazing or somebody would win out within the first like 2 months. So I think it'd be fun to watch. Do you see I know he's saying like, trade me to Brooklyn. That's all I want to do. Just trade me to Brooklyn. Is there could Miami get involved? Could Toronto get involved? Like now that Giannis is theoretically off the table for those teams, like I don't think Harden would mesh with what the Heat have going, and I don't even know if he would mesh with what the Raptors have going, but he still is like clearly a top 7 or 8 player in the world. Do you think it's just Brooklyn or nothing at this point?
Well, it sounds like for Harden it is. And one more note on Brooklyn. Anthony Puccio, who covers the Nets, I couldn't find the actual poll, but I voted in a poll that he either posted or retweeted or something this morning, and he has his finger on the pulse of like Nets fans better than anybody. And it was just straight up, do you want James Harden on the Nets? And it was 55% yes, 45% no, which is absolutely insane for a player as good as James Harden, right? And I think that says a lot about the perception of his style of play. And it ties into what you're saying with teams like Toronto and Miami. Like nobody has these questions about like, if you can get LeBron James, should you? If you can get Giannis or get Durant or get Kawhi, I don't know, should you do it? Like, it's just crazy that that's even a question for how good and how productive James Harden has been. But I think that's a question that those teams would have to ask. In terms of what they could put together, I do think what the Nets could offer is probably better, certainly better than what Toronto could put on the table. Especially if you're including Siakam, it's like, what are you bringing Harden into in the first place? Not a great situation. I think you're creating a team that's like as good as the Rockets at best. Miami has the hero piece. I don't think they include Bam. I don't think you include Jimmy. But if you're willing to throw in Tyler Hero as the swing piece, it then becomes a question of how much do you value Hero versus Karis LeVert versus Jared Allen, some of those other Nets pieces that could be thrown in. The thing with Brooklyn is they can at least offer you something of a core. If you're Houston, it's like, all right, we'll give you these 3 or 4 guys who are all pretty good. You can work them out for a year, keep the ones you like, trade the ones you don't. And with Miami, it's like outside of Hero, if Bam's not on the table, what else of appeal are you sending? Because Hero's a really nice young player, but he's not Jason Tatum or something like that. I don't know what the second piece is for Miami. Maybe it's picks, but I'm not sure if that's enough to get it done either.
Yeah, I think Hero is the best young player who has not signed his second contract, who they could, I don't know. I mean, so if you trade for LeVert or really any of those Nets guys, or even if you trade for like Ben Simmons, there's already kind of like a ticking clock on that young core. But if you trade for Hero, I mean, you probably have him for the next like 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's an appealing aspect of getting Hero. But I think you're right. Like, I think, we saw that Nets team before they got KD and Kyrie looked like a pretty promising young core. And then all of a sudden, that kind of got sidetracked.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think that if I were the Nets, I would offer those 3 guys, and I wouldn't even. I mean, I might offer like this year's pick or something, but I would try to hold out and not include some unprotected like 2024, 2025 like first rounders, because it's just like, well, show me what offer we're beating here.
Right.
You have to trade Harden before the end of his contract, and we're offering you these 3 good young players. If there's a better offer out there, let us know, but we're not going to start just piling on these picks.
Exactly.
Like, they're the ones with the leverage, whereas like the Pelicans were the ones with the leverage in the Bucks trade. I think the Nets are the ones with the leverage in this situation.
Unfamiliar territory for the Nets to have leverage in a negotiation. I think they're panicking. Let me throw out a couple more. Now you have the wheels spinning. So first, could Milwaukee have offered DiVincenzo, Bledsoe, Hill, 3 first rounders and 2 swaps for James Harden? Does that move it for you if you're Houston? I don't know if that's better than the Nets package. I don't know if it is.
Like, we would have discussions about it, but I think that's an unrealistic, like, Giannis and Harden, like, that's just not, I just don't see that as a realistic pairing from a personality standpoint.
Okay. Next one. Something built around Jaylen Brown and Kemba Walker.
Right. I mean, I think I would it be Kemba or would it be Marcus Smart?
It could be Marcus Smart. I mean, I think I'm just looking at Kemba as like a bad fit around Harden. I think you're okay parting with Kemba in that situation.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah, it could be Marcus Smart. If Smart gets it done, sure. But if Houston asks for Walker, do you do that?
I'm not sure that Kemba Walker's not a negative value contract. So if I can get Jaylen Brown, I'm pursuing that package, because I think Jaylen Brown can be an all-star for a long time and maybe even like a second, third team All-NBA type of guy. Like, he could be the second best player on a really good team. And like, I don't think LeVert could be the second best player on a really good team. So I would pursue a Jaylen Brown package if at all possible. Like, just him, and then matching salary to me is pretty intriguing if I'm the Rockets.
Okay. Jamal Murray. I'm not going to include Michael Porter. Jamal Murray, several, probably 2 first-round picks, we'll say, and, take your pick of Bol Bol, PJ Dozier, Monte Morris, that crew.
That's one where I'm interested if I'm the Rockets, but I don't see the Nuggets being interested in that. Like I don't think
Which is
the
crazy,
Nuggets,
right? It's James
I don't
Harden.
think the Nuggets would do Jamal Murray for James Harden just straight up. I think
There's a chance, yeah. I think with the way that they built that team, I think there's a case to be made that Jamal Murray, despite being, I don't know, 20, 30 slots lower than James Harden, if you rank every player in the league, is a better fit for them. Which again goes back to the argument of like, it's not even necessarily what's the best package for Houston. It's like some of these teams might not even be willing to offer their best package for James Harden.
Which the amount of good teams that would be interested in bringing James Harden onto their roster.
Yes, exactly.
It's not a long list, right? There's just because he needs the ball, and if you're a good team, you probably already have a guy that needs the ball who you like more, who you've had longer and you've had success with, and
he needs the ball in a different way than LeBron needs the ball or Kawhi.
Right. So it's just, yeah. I mean, you just, it might be basically the Nets are the only team interested. So, yeah.
It might end up being a perfect marriage.
Is Steve Nash having buyer's remorse on taking that job already?
I think he had buyer's remorse like day 2 when Kyrie Irving said, actually, we don't have a coach. Like that guy that we just introduced as our coach 2 days ago is not in fact the coach. Yeah. No, this is like a mix of all like the bad super teams that we've seen come together so far. Like it has some mid 2010s Nets vibes. It has some 08 Celtics vibes, a little bit of Warriors vibes. Like they're trying to stack it so much, like in the coaching staff and the roster and everything about it, that it has like a little bit of a too good to be true feel to it. And I hope it works out. I want good things for Durant especially, but I don't know.
In those like back in the day, like there were some playoff situations where Kobe and like LeBron were just kind of fed up with the way their teammates were playing, so they'd sort of hang out by half court. Like, and Harden would do this all the time in Houston, where he just kind of like, I'm not going to partake in this possession because I'm pissed at you guys. I could see a scenario in Brooklyn where 2 guys are doing that on like opposite sides of the court. Like Kyrie and James Harden are just like sitting at half court because they're fed up with the way the offense is going. And the Nets are playing 3-on-5. Like this has just all kinds of blow up potential, and I can't wait.
All right, let me just throw 3 more quick ones at you, and then we'll finally get to the draft. So we've been talking about Bradley Beal, mostly in the context of Brooklyn potentially waiting that situation out. I don't think the Wizards are going to go out of their way. Like literally 5 minutes ago, I just got an alert from a Tim Bontemps tweet that said Tommy Shepard said they are unequivocally not trading Bradley Beal. So I don't think this is on the table. But if James Harden's available, do you dangle Bradley Beal as the main piece in that deal? Like, would you do Beal possibly straight up for Harden, Beal plus Troy Brown, Isak Bonga, whoever it is?
I think every team in the league would take Beal over Harden.
I don't know. I don't know about every team.
Which team wouldn't?
I think all the bad teams would rather have Harden because he's such a floor raiser.
But I mean, Beal's 6 years younger. He's
not 6 years younger, is he? I mean, what is Harden? 31? Beal is 27 and a half.
Oh, I thought Beal was
like a 4-year difference.
Yeah. Still, I mean, you have Beal. Beal's probably got like 3 more prime years left, 3 or 4 more. Harden might have 0 more. Like I don't know. You compare, like from everything I've heard, like Beal is just like a great guy. Like the Wizards, part of the reason they love him is because like he's been so like just such a good, logo of the franchise, basically, like in the community and stuff like that. And like it's just, I think the Wizards would rather have Beal. I think the Nets would rather have Beal. Like I think if you're the Rockets at this point, you'd rather have Beal because your star is asking out. Yeah. So there might be some bad teams that would just be like, hey, Harden's gonna get us to the 8 seed, and he might sell some more tickets whenever fans are allowed back in the stadium. But I don't see that.
Okay, now we're going to get to the fun ones, the bad teams. The Chicago Bulls, Zach LaVine, Kobe White, and the number 4 pick in tomorrow's draft.
So are we that to like the Nets offer? And a
Yeah,
theoretical
sure. I mean,
Nets
it's just
offer?
you're evaluating it from either side.
I'm not really that interested in that if I'm Houston.
Okay.
I would definitely do that if I was Chicago because, you don't know where that would go, but like the Bulls aren't anywhere close to having something that resembles like a fully functioning offense or anything. So it's not like Harden's coming in and disrupting all this chemistry that Kobe White and Zach LaVine have going, or Lauri Markkanen and Wendell Carter have going. Like they need someone to kind of bring things together. So I think the Bulls would happily sign up for 2 or 3 years of Harden and just sort of see where it takes them in the East. But I got to imagine that the Nets package is quite a bit better than what the Bulls would be able to offer.
Okay. This is where it gets a little wild. We know Atlanta wants to contend. Is there any world that in which they would try to flip Trae Young for James Harden? There's some salary constraints that would need to be taken into account. I'm pretending that those don't exist right now, but if you could turn Trae Young into James Harden, is it worth giving up on the future of Trae Young for the present of James Harden?
I think so. I don't think they would do it just because they already basically traded Luka for Trae Young, and like,
right.
It's kind of like you're so invested in Trae Young being as good as possible, but I think they should do that probably. Now James Harden getting to live in Atlanta, that could be a match made in heaven off the court. But yeah, I mean, that's a fun one because I don't think. I mean, they don't have enough shooting really around him there. I mean, if you're starting Collins and Capella,
right,
like you're already kind of, you can't really run the James Harden offense there. But
yeah,
you're in that situation already with Trae Young, and Harden's better than Trae Young. So yeah, I'd probably do that.
Okay, I got two more quick ones. We don't have to go deep on these. The Pelicans, they have all those trade assets from the Anthony Davis deal. They got even more from the Holiday deal. Brandon Ingram and, maybe throw in Lonzo Ball and one or two of those future picks.
Yeah, that's so like Brandon Ingram's in the exact sort of range of young all-star that you would part with to get Harden in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, you're on the one hand, Harden's like an okay fit with Zion because I think Zion probably is going to have a early peak and like a steep decline.
Like Griffin.
Right. And so you are kind of in win now mode with Zion, like not necessarily 2021, but like
no, you are. That's fair.
2023. Like you need to try to be winning playoff series sooner than later. But on the other hand, there hasn't been a single star player yet that has liked playing with James Harden. And if Zion doesn't like playing with James Harden, then Zion is going to force his way out. It's you can't really piss off Zion if you're the Pelicans. So you'd have to probably ask him what he thought about that. But I think it's definitely an interesting one. And I mean, they have like JJ Redick, they have George Hill, so they would be able to space it fairly well. So I would approach Zion and I'd be like, hey, like we have a chance to turn Brandon Ingram into James Harden. What do you think about that? And if he's interested, then I'd go for it. If not, then I would just shut it down.
I do think with that one too, based on the Ingram, I don't know if it's from the trade from last year or the extension that he's going to sign. I think that trade would have to happen later in the season. It wouldn't be eligible to take place right now. But again, probably not a bridge we're going to have to cross. We'll finish out with Minnesota. D'Angelo Russell, the number 1 pick tomorrow, and let's say Malik Beasley.
Yeah, I'd do that. I'd do that in a heartbeat if I'm Minnesota.
For Houston, for you personally, I'll even throw in Jake Layman. Does that sweeten it?
You need Layman there when Harden gets there to spread that floor. I mean, Towns and Harden together, that I would love to watch. Man, that could be just such an incredible offensive duo. Yeah, man, I wonder if if they did that trade and you're basically just left with Harden and Towns and just, whatever. Like, are they a playoff team to you?
Yeah. This is another one where I look at the rest of the West and say, I don't know. But yeah, yes, they are, because I think Harden's that good. And I think they're not the 5 seed, but they're probably the 7 or the 8 seed. Yeah.
And the best teammate Towns has ever played with is Jimmy Butler. And when that core was healthy, they were on like a playoff trajectory. And Harden's a better regular season player than Jimmy Butler is. Again, like, that defense would be a disaster, but you're talking about maybe 2 of the 5 best offensive players in the league playing together. I mean, that'd be really fun to watch.
Yeah, it most certainly would. All right, let's transition to NBA draft talk. Where do you want to go with this? I mean, we didn't put together much of a framework just because we've talked about most of these guys. It's been really tough to parse through what's real and what's not, as far as the rumors swirling around who's going to go number 1, who could potentially trade out. But I think one thing that is interesting, if you look at the NBA draft odds that we've been monitoring on the DraftKings Sportsbook, LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards are now almost equal to go number 1 overall. It's Ball minus 115, Edwards minus 106. I believe Edwards was the pretty heavy favorite when we talked last week, right? I think he was like minus 275.
Yeah. I still think he's the favorite because I don't think the Timberwolves are smart enough / brave enough to draft someone over D'Angelo Russell, and risk D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns both being pissed that you disrespected D'Angelo in this way, and now they both won out, or they hate LaMelo, and I think LaMelo's a way better prospect than Edwards, but I think they're going to end up making this pick based on fit and not ruffling the feathers of their 2 quote unquote stars. So I'd still bet Edwards there.
If Minnesota keeps the pick, yes, I'm with you. This feels like a just kind of march toward a slow death with Edwards, almost. I mean, I don't know. I'm starting to come around on the fact that maybe there's a better chance than we're giving him that he turns into a good player. I don't think he has.
You're higher on him than I am, I think.
I am.
But all I know is the chances of him being a good player do not go up with him ending up on the Timberwolves. Like, he needs to be around, like, if you put him on the Warriors, like, I don't think the Warriors would ever take him, but you put him in the same locker room as like Draymond Green and Steve Kerr, and maybe you have a chance of kind of fixing some of his deficiencies. But if you put him in the same locker room as D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns with Ryan Saunders as the head coach, I think I don't even know. I just think it's such a terrible place for him to try to develop and learn from people that actually take the game seriously and stuff like that. So, I think they're going to do it. I think it's going to be a disaster, and the Timberwolves are going to keep being the T-Wolves.
I think from a best bet perspective, I still like Wiseman at plus 900. You're just betting on a trade up. He's not going to Minnesota. He still hasn't even met with the Wolves, hasn't worked out for the Wolves. That's off the table. And there's a reason he's 9-1 to go number 1, because the team holding the pick isn't going to take him. But I think if any team trades up to 1, it's going to be to get James Wiseman.
I could see it. I think there are enough teams that like LaMelo Ball that it could be to get LaMelo, but Wiseman is the one we've sort of heard the most. Sort of, the Charlotte one is is kind of the most rumored trade up, right? So that would be to get Wiseman. I don't mind that. I just so where do you think there will be some trades happening in the top 3 of the draft?
I feel like there's the years that they say there's going to be a ton of trades, there aren't. And then when we don't think there are going to be trades, there are. I don't feel like the right deal is there for Golden State. I think they're holding out for the home run type of deal. And I have a hard time seeing them settling for anything less than that. I think number 1 is for sale. Honestly, I think Minnesota knows that this is not what they should be doing, and that pick is available. It's just a matter of what team's going to be willing to bite the bullet and do it.
Yeah, 100% it's available. I mean, I think they know that they could screw this pick up royally and look really stupid for having Jared Culver and a bust at the number 1 pick in back-to-back drafts. So I definitely think they want to trade it. I just haven't heard anything that makes a ton of sense. Like, yeah, the Knicks would love to trade up and get that pick. I mean, the Pistons would probably love to get that pick. There's plenty of bad teams that would love to get that pick. Like, are you willing to trade 1 for 3 to get Miles Bridges? Like, if you're willing to sort of sell it that low and just kind of take yourself out of the position of being the team that screws up the number 1 pick,
right?
Then I think it will get moved if they're willing to sort of settle for that type of a package. But I just don't know where this haul would come from.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting a haul. That's off the table. You're not getting 2 future firsts or an unprotected first next year from a bad team. Like, that's not happening. I wouldn't call Miles Bridges a haul. But look, if I'm Minnesota and I'm not, I say, all right, look, I'll take either one of LaMelo and Edwards. I think they're equally risky. I think they're equally, ceilinged. We know Wiseman's going to go 1. Just give me whoever's there at 3 and Miles Bridges. Like, I would be okay with that, because if you're not taking Wiseman at 1 anyway, they're making the decision for you, I guess, that you can't make yourself.
And you're paying a little less money for that player.
Exactly.
With the 3rd overall pick versus the 1st overall pick.
And you're getting a guy, Miles Bridges, who's like not terrible. I don't know, he's not great, right, but he's an asset. I think that would be a fine deal.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure that's probably on the table, and they're probably going to go up to draft day and like the minute or the hour beforehand and give teams a chance to beat something like that. But is there any way to gamble on whether they trade that pick? Or is it basically just you bet on James Wiseman?
No, there isn't, unfortunately. Although DraftKings has added a lot more props since we did our prop preview last week, which you can find on the site. You know what? Let's just use these as a guide to talk about the draft. So we'll go player draft position. And they're a little bit confusing, as anyone who listened to last week's pod knows. Luckily, we were able to talk through that while on the air. But we have a handle on that now. So when I say over, like, for example, over 2.5, that means that the player will be drafted after the 3rd pick, or I guess after the 2nd pick in that scenario. So over means after, under means before. So we'll just go down the list and, kind of rapid fire. Tell me what you think about each of these guys. We'll start with LaMelo Ball. Over, under 2.5.
Man, I stay away. Like, I'm just not betting it because, like, I think he's the best prospect, but I'm not confident he goes top 2.
Okay.
But how often in a draft is a guy that it's not a majority of teams necessarily, but more teams think he's the best prospect than any other prospect in the draft. Like, how often does that player get to 3? It doesn't seem like it happens very often. So
sure,
I wouldn't bet it because I think he could fall to 3, but I don't think he should fall out of even the top spot.
All right, James Wiseman, same number, 2.5.
I still like the under. I still think he goes 1 or 2 because I don't really think he gets past 2.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair, especially if the Warriors keep that pick. Edwards is at 1.5.
Would it make more sense to bet the under or to bet that he goes first overall, or are they basically the same odds?
They are the exact same odds.
Yeah,
I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would see. Like, do you think those odds are good enough to bet it?
No, I don't feel nearly confident enough about that.
Yeah, I have a feeling that just something is going to come out of left field on draft night, and some team that like we haven't even been talking about is just going to trade up and get LaMelo. I feel like that's in the cards. But yeah, I think that's a stay away as well.
Okay. Obi Toppin, over under 4.5.
I continue to love this over. Like I refuse to believe he's going top 4. I don't.
Where would that number have to be? Like for you, like 27.5?
I think even 5.5, I'd probably stay away because I could see Dan Gilbert taking him, like making an executive decision that we're taking him. But I just don't see any of the top 4 teams taking him.
I think this bet is framed around the Cavs, who have the 5th pick. That's what it hinges on, right? I think there's a chance he could go to Chicago.
Well, it's 4.5 though, right? It's not 5. If it was 5.5, then it'd be a good line. Like 4.5, you're winning it because he's going to the Cavs or he's going to the Knicks. Like I feel very, but I do also love that one where you get to pick the exact team. I love Toppin to the Knicks. I forget what the odds were, but it was pretty long odds for Toppin going 8th overall because you're pinpointing the pick. But like his connection with Leon Rose is just runs so deep that
it's 6-1 for the record.
Yeah, I love that bet.
Yeah, I mean, if he's there at 8, that's where he's going. I just think it's a matter of, does he get past the Bulls at 4? Does he get past the Cavs at 5? If the Hawks can't move that pick at 6, I think there's a chance. And I also think there's a chance that, especially if you don't really have to give anything up, one of those teams in the mid to late first round might see him as a guy who could contribute right away.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine the Hawks. I mean, would you want John Collins, Clint Capella, and Obi Toppin on the same roster? Or would that just mean they're trading John Collins?
I don't know. Counterpoint, it's the Hawks. I think anything is possible. This is the team that traded Luka Doncic away.
I wanted to get your take on this, like going back a little bit.
Sure.
I forget who posited this as a potential trade, but basically like John Collins for the number 2 pick, or John Collins and 6 for number 2. I think it might have been like if you're the Warriors and you want a win now piece, would you trade 2 for John Collins and 6?
Can I pay John Collins? Or is Wiggins involved?
You'd have to extend him. Or I guess I can't remember exactly how that would work, but
well, you'd have to send Wiggins back, right?
Oh yeah, you would.
Okay, well, in that scenario, absolutely, yes. If it's implied that I'm keeping John Collins and I'm doing 2, I mean, I don't even know if I need the 6th pick back.
Right. Yeah, I don't think you get the 6 back with Wiggins.
No.
But I like that idea of the Warriors. Now, I think that their whole plan is to take Wiseman, not allow him to show any weaknesses, and then hope that Wiseman plus the T-Wolves pick gets them Beal. Yep. But I think John Collins playing next to Draymond Green would be really interesting.
Yeah, as a fairly recent Lakers fan, that would not be ideal for the Western Conference. I would be rooting against that outcome because I think that would be a great trade for the Warriors. Although I still think they have their sights set a little bit higher. I think they want Beal. I think they want somebody who's an established, proven all-star. Although, I mean, Collins is the type of guy who is young enough that he could conceivably kind of carry you into that next phase. He's never going to be a top 5 or 10 player in the league probably, but I like that deal a lot for Golden State. Back to the over-unders. We'll do a few more of these. Denny Avdia also has that number, same as Toppin, 4.5.
I like the under there as well. Not as much as I like the Toppin one, because I could see the Bulls taking Abdia at 4. I can't really see them taking Toppin.
So the numbers favor Abdia, as in he has a better odds to go in the top 4.
Right. I mean, both of these guys are guys that I'm low on. So I like both the bets, but I like the Toppin one more.
Okay. Tyrese Halliburton, 7.5.
Over. Like I think he goes. I think his floor is probably 6 to the Hawks. Like I just don't see him getting past 6 because I think he's the. Would you agree that he's the easiest lottery prospect in this draft to like fit onto any kind of roster? Like,
yeah, no question. I think he's the guy that if you trade down, you're maybe targeting him because it's a little bit taboo to take Tyrese Halliburton 1. But I think a gun to their head, a lot of these teams would like rather just take the security that Tyrese Halliburton brings.
Yeah, so he's easy to fit into any rotation, and he's ready to play and potentially help you win games right away. Whereas the top 3 guys, Ball, Wiseman, Edwards, even if they all go on to have great careers, they're going to have really bad rookie seasons just in terms of like helping a team win right now.
Yeah.
And so many of these teams are looking at this like, how can we get anyone solid? Like they're not even trying to take a big swing in this draft. They're just like, can any of these guys play?
Yes.
And I think they all pretty much agree that Halliburton can play, and he fits onto all these rosters. So I think that's a slam dunk. I think 4 is a really good fit with the Bulls. I think I don't really think the Cavs would go that direction, but I think it'd be a good fit there. And I think the Hawks are a really good fit. So I think like Bulls or Hawks is basically where I see Halliburton going.
So looking at the odds for the 4th overall pick, which player will go 4th overall? And of course, this would pertain to a team that would maybe trade to that spot. But let's say, assuming the Bulls keep the number 4 pick and make that selection, who do you like out of these names? Abdia is plus 110, Okongwu plus 150, Obi Toppin plus 200, Wiseman plus 575, Patrick Williams plus 800, Killian Hayes plus 1,000. You can get a Coro like 20 to 1 as well.
Of those bets, like I think Halliburton would be my pick, but you didn't list him, so I would go Patrick Williams at plus 800. Just I could see the new front office kind of saying, the nice thing about taking Patrick Williams, if you're a brand new GM, is he's such a project that you're not going to be graded on that pick. Mm-hmm. Like you explained to your owner, like this guy has the 3rd or 4th highest ceiling in the draft, but he's not going to be ready for a couple of years. So you get a nice long leash to develop him. And he gives you some upside. Like that young core it's not as bad as the Knicks young core, but it's a really kind of depressing quote unquote young core. And it's devoid of upside that you can really dream on. So I wouldn't expect them to go with Williams there, but they have been linked to him a little bit. So I could see Williams going there. Plus 800 isn't too bad.
What about the Celtics at 14? RJ Hampton is the slight favorite to go there, plus 550. Kira Lewis, 650. Alexei Pokusevsky, 7 to 1. Sadiq Bey, 750. Halliburton, 750 to fall all the way there. Then you have Aaron Naismith, Jalen Smith, Precious Achiuwa are your top 8.
Of those, I think Naismith would be the one I would bet on. I think that pick's either getting traded or they're going to take an upperclassman who can play right away. Like I don't think they have any desire to bring in someone they have to develop who's not going to be ready to compete. And you look at their depth chart, they just have all these like young guards who are kind of like, I could see someone like Tyrell Terry being number 1 on their board, but when you have a bunch of other undersized guards that you've taken in recent drafts, bring another one in who's probably not going to be able to help a ton in 2021. So I think they might go with a guy like Neesmith or someone like Desmond Bane who's ready to step in right away.
All right, so we talked about these two bets in one of our articles that's up on the site, went up last week. Number of freshmen drafted in the top 10, and the number remains at 4.5. Has your opinion on this one changed at all from last week?
So I'm looking at the mock draft you and I are working on, or mock draft 2.0. It basically comes down to, do Okoro and Williams go in the top 10?
Right, and Okoro, I think it happens, but it feels like a little bit less of a lock now than it did last week.
I think, even though this isn't what's going to show up on our mock draft, I think Williams is more likely to go in the top 10 than Okoro.
Yeah, I think so too.
But, so what are the odds on that? Are you getting good odds if you say 5 freshmen go? Or is it?
That's the favorite. That's at -125. Under is now at 103, plus 103.
I kind of like the over. There's always a chance that you get bailed out and like Tyrell Terry goes 10 or something. But I kind of think all 5 of those guys. So we're Wiseman, Edwards, Okongwu, they all go. But I do kind of think Okoro and Williams both go.
Okay.
So I do kind of like the over on 4.5 there.
Okay, and then the other one, number of international players drafted in the top 10. That number is at 3.5, and the under is a heavy favorite at -560. Over 3.5 is at 4-1.
Yeah, I love the under because you basically need Hampton or Pokusevski to go for that to not hit, right?
Yeah, and the Kings are picking at 12, so I think Pokusevski's off the board.
I mean, I think it's not even a lock to me that Hayes goes top 10. So you're obviously like LaMelo obviously goes, Avdia probably goes. I wouldn't even say that's a lock though, but I don't think Hampton goes top 10. I just think he's too much of a work in progress. I think obviously very high ceiling, but he seems more like kind of a 10 to 20 type of guy. And Pokusevski, I think at some point you roll the dice on him. I don't think it's in the top 10 though.
All right, now this one is listed on DraftKings under the James Anderson specials section. Number of Arizona players drafted in the first round. The number is at 1.5, and the odds are even on either side.
Oh man, under, because I think Nico Mannion isn't very good, and we talked about this in our last pod. Like, he's like, while we've seen Patrick Williams kind of move up boards the further we get from the season and like kind of the high school, when these guys are high schoolers, I think we're seeing Mannion move down boards the further we get, because like Mannion had more pedigree coming out of high school than Patrick Williams did. But
by far.
But like, he just, like, I look at Nico Mannion and I'm like maybe he's Alex Caruso. Like, what's the ceiling with him? Like, I don't see how there's just not a ton to dream on there. He didn't shoot it very well. He's not, like, he just doesn't project to be a starting point guard to me. So I think best case scenario, he's like your first guard off the bench, but he doesn't have good measurables. I mean, I don't think Mannion goes in the first round. I definitely think Josh Green goes in the first round, and he might even go in the top 20, but I don't think Mannion goes.
So here's my cat's take. I don't think Mannion's the guy we need to be concerned about. I think it might be Zeke Naji. I think Mannion's a second-round guy for me as well. Loved him as a prospect, but he to me, he doesn't have that, like, he could be a great backup point guard feel. Man, maybe he can, but I feel like he like Mannion like plays like a star. And I feel like he would have a tough time not being that. Does that make sense?
As all Arizona point guards do.
Right. Star.
You don't go there if you don't play like a star if you're a point guard. But I think you're right. Now my take, like, if I were running an NBA team, like the backup center types, like Zeke you just don't take them in the first round from a contractual standpoint. Like you don't want to pay those guys first round money. So you take them in the second round. But, after the top 20 or so guys go, I think it's just a total free for all. And you're going to see all kinds, like, there are going to be a handful of guys that go like last 10 picks of the first round that nobody had mocked going there.
Yeah. So
maybe it is a stay away. Now that you mentioned that, but if there was a way to bet against Nico Mannion just by itself, then that's a sharp bet.
Yeah, we need these gambling sites to be a little bit more pointed with some of these, a little bit more mean, I guess, for lack of a better term, with some of these props.
Yeah. Is Nico Mannion going to suck in the NBA?
Yeah, right.
Plus 150.
Yeah, well, you would need like a rigid definition of suck, which would be someone would have to type that out, and it would be awesome. All right, any other lingering draft takes? We got about 40 hours or so, 30 hours, I should say, before the draft starts as we record this afternoon.
I think it's going to be a whirlwind. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to just be a really crazy night. I think there are going to be some unpredictable stuff. And I know everyone talks about like Ball, Wiseman, Edwards, like the clear top three. I would not rule out someone else sneaking into that top three, because I just think there's like, first of all, you can't believe like when reporters are telling you like NBA teams tell us like this and this and this, that's because those teams up there want someone to like trade up, because they perceive that those are the three guys people might trade up to get. But I'm just not sold that those are the three guys that go top three, because I think that it's very easy to talk yourself out of any of them. So that'd be one thing I'm kind of watching for, is just, does someone else sneak into that top three?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the odds, like, it's just, there's such a chasm between those three and everybody else that it makes it seem like if they're, I'm with you, I think that could happen. It's just so hard to pinpoint who that guy might be.
Well, I think it'd be Halliburton or Okongwu.
Halliburton's the one who makes the most sense, I think.
Like, I would not be surprised if the Warriors took Halliburton, and I would not be surprised if the Hornets took Okongwu.
The Warriors taking Halliburton would be that would be like the most universally praised pick, I think. That would become like the new whoever the Spurs take at 28 is going to be a star. Like, I think if any other franchise did that, it would be like, what are they doing? This is so bold. But with the Warriors, they've earned this like blind trust with moves like that, and I think they could get away with it.
Yeah, he fits so well on that roster. Oh man,
right.
He's ready to win right away. Like, yeah,
exactly.
I wouldn't be surprised if they had him there on their board. The reason I wouldn't bet on it is just I think that you take the player that you think gets you the most from the Wizards. And
yes, exactly.
It's tough if you're Washington to talk yourself into like Halliburton being some great star or something like that.
Yeah, they're going to be in such a weird spot where, if Wiseman's the pick, it's like their bench is so thin that they probably need him to contribute, but at the same time, he has to be good, because if he has 5 bad games in a row, that potential trade value goes down. Like, it's such a strange position for them to be in.
Yeah, I mean, do you think, like, I went like about a month ago, I just sort of kind of assumed that Wiseman on the Warriors would have a pretty decent rookie season. But the more I think about it, like, he's so raw from a game rep standpoint that he actually might not be very good as a rookie. So they'd have to consider, and it might be an excuse for them to take LaMelo there, under the assumption that he would hold his trade value better than Wiseman as a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's going to be really fascinating. I mean, the Wolves, are they going to screw it up? Are they going to trade it? The Warriors, like, are they going to find a way to trade it? I'm really excited. It's not a good draft class, but it's still going to be an exciting draft.
That's the prop that we need. Just, will the Wolves screw this up? It's like, yes. Minus 10,000.
Yes. Bet the house.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I appreciate all the contributions you've made over the last couple of weeks, not only this podcast, but articles, your time putting into these mocks and whatnot. And, enjoy the coverage and very much looking forward to Wednesday night.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me. Looking forward to it.